Okay, so in this video, we are going to put a snake on this board. Now we want to represent the snake as an array of positions and use CSS classes to color those cells, let's say to a green color for the snake. So the snake is just like a list of cells, right? Now, for us to keep track of which cells are the snake, we need to sort of manage to actually have a reference to all of the cells that we have here. Right now, we create the cells and we add them to the board, but we don't have them, we don't keep track of them. We don't have a reference of them to go and later access them. So let's go and create an array here. Let's say const cells, empty array. And so here we can just push every one of these cells to the array. Okay, now we have an array of all the cells. Now what we can do is we can go and try to create a, like get some of the cells to indicate a snake for us, and then try to like color them in a certain way. For that, let's go create a draw function, and I'm gonna add, before I do the draw, I'm gonna add some styles here. Let's go, and so I'm basically using a shade of green and a slightly different shade of the green for like the head of the snake. Let's go back here, and so what we will do is let's say let's create like an initial snake. Let's say const snake, and this is an array of objects. So let's say we want to start somewhere in the middle of the board. So we can use something like a coordinate system, right? So we can say, let's say its x is 10 and its y is 10. So because this is like 20 by 20, so 10 and 10 kind of falls somewhere in the middle. And we're gonna go and let's say we have the snake to be on the row 10, but we put like its body right beside its head. So let's make a little snake with one cell as the head and two cells as bodies. So this is like 9 and 8. So it's gonna fall somewhere, like let's say if this is y10, it's gonna be like three cells somewhere in this area, right after one another. So let's say that's our snake, right? Now let's go to the draw, and we can take this snake and say snake dot for each. Okay, so for each takes a function, right? So let's go and put a function in here, and what it does is that it gives us each one of these elements, right? Let's call that like a segment of the snake. I could have called it a cell, but I didn't want it to sort of confuse a reader with this cell up here. So it's like a special cell. It's part of the body of the snake. And then the second argument here is going to be the index. So like this index is going to be like 0, 1, 2. And the index is helpful for us to distinguish between the head and the body. So if index is 0, then we're dealing with the head, right? So what I want to do is I want to map this xy to the cell. Now you should consider that like I could have made this cell a 2D array, so to literally correspond to the dimensions here, the number of rows and columns, but I made it a 1D array, and that's okay. This is laid out in a row-wise fashion, so like this rows in, this rows in, this rows in. And if I want to map one of these coordinates back to the linear index of the cell, what I need to do, I need to get the y, because that points to one of these rows, and I need to multiply that by the width of the grid, which is like grid size, and then that way like it gets like 10 rows out of the way, and then I'm gonna add the X to it, so it will go like somewhere in between like this axis X. It puts a point and it goes to that position. So we can calculate like the cell index, and that would be, again, as I said, you take the Y, so segment.y, you do times grid size, and then you add the segment.x to it. So when you have the cell index, what you want to do is basically go to the cells array, go to that index. Now you have the cell element, and you can say class list dot add and give it the snake, right? And the thing is that if it's the first cell, this is a special, like this is the snake. So now what we need to do is we need to put this draw in action. Okay. Oh, I forgot to say to declare this variable, and so there we go. We got a snake. All right. Now there's one other thing that I want to do, and this is sort of forward thinking in anticipation of what's going to come later, is that if I want to create some sort of a movement here, then that means the coordinates of the body and head of the snake is going to change. And so I'm going to have to like update the coordinates and call draw again. And this needs to happen repeatedly. And that would mean if we keep adding these classes to different cells, but we never clear out the cells, then like eventually all of the cells are going to end up being the body of the snake. So it would be good that before we start drawing the snake to the board, we would clear out all the cells that have these class names to them. So you sort of clean the board and then draw to it. And if like every time you go and you want to draw again, you clean the board and again you draw to it. So to do that, we can say cells, and we do for each, and we can just get the cell and say cell dot class list remove, and give it these two class names. Okay, so right now we're not going to see a difference here because I'm just calling draw one time and the coordinates of the snake is not changing. But this is part of the logic that you gotta wipe clean the board and then draw on it. And it's something that we've seen before when we were working with the canvas to create the brick breaker game. Here we're not using the canvas, we're using the div to create the game in it, but some of the ideas for building the game is similar. Like we're gonna have to create some sort of a game loop here as well, but we'll get there.